Hey there, and thanks for stopping by to check out my video. Now we have got a super cool and very unique comparison in the works here for you. If you're curious how these new high-end digital optics with all kinds of day and night, laser rangefinder, ballistic calculator capabilities compare to a traditional daytime optic, maybe with a weapon-mounted laser rangefinder, then stick around because we're going to take a deep dive into that exact idea during this video. By the end of it, you're going to understand exactly what a digital optic, in this case the Thermnight 635R, is capable of out to 1,000 yards on this Mark 12, and what that looks like versus this Element Nexus traditional day optic. Now, how are we going to do the comparison? First off, we're going to move down to the 100-yard line. We'll shoot groups with each optic. We'll get velocity performance information out of our load. We'll plug that into our ballistic calculator, pair that up with each of the solutions, and then we'll move out and start shooting steel from 400-ish yards out to 1,000. I'm going to bring you along for the full journey. You'll get a view through each optic. You'll get an idea of laser rangefinder performance, what they're truly capable of, and how accurate is the ballistic calculator. So if you like the sounds of it, stick around. Let me know in the comments down below what you expect for performance differences out of these two solutions. Now really quick, let's talk about the gear we're going to run in this video. So certainly the first item will be the DNT Thermnight 635R. So DNT, they reached out to me saying, hey, would you be interested in doing any kind of content around the Thermnight? And I said, heck yes. I've seen a ton of videos about this. There seems like a lot of interest in this optic. It's delivering some pretty major capabilities for a very attractive price point. So this unit's going to give you a 20 power digital daytime zoom. It's got a laser rangefinder that'll stretch out to roughly 1,000 yards according to their information. And it's going to give you their ballistic calculator that's going to allow you to range a target and then boom, have a shooting solution right here in the optic. Almost sounds too good to be true when you consider, especially the 635R, it's coming in at $3,000. So this $3,000-ish price point on the 635R, that's going to represent the top end of that Thermnight lineup. DNT also sent me the 225R, which is a roughly $1,000 unit and represents maybe the lower end of the Thermnight series. So it's going to let you get into the Thermnight series, get those capabilities, but maybe with a little bit different display or different maybe thermal resolution, etc. The reason I chose the 635R at roughly $3,000 for this comparison is because of the day optic. So the day optic we're going to run here is the Element Nexus, provided by Utah Airguns. So they've been a long-time supporter. They've provided me several of these Element optics, which I've had great luck with. The Nexus in particular is a 4-25 optic with a beautiful reticle, very nice glass, and toolless adjustable turrets. This thing comes in at about $2,000, and it's sitting in the zero gravity mount. So the zero gravity mount, say $250 to $300, so you're at about $2,300. Pair that with the Tango Enos Fire 4000 weapon mounted laser rangefinder, which comes in at about $1,400 more dollars. Now you're up to $37, and the SG Pulse Level. It's about another $150, so you're at about $3,800 to $3,900 in the day optic setup to match the capabilities of the Thermnight. So there's quite a bit of money invested right here. My question is, does the Thermnight actually perform? Is it actually going to be a capable daytime optic? And that's what we're going to do in this video. So by the end of it, we're going to have an idea, can I make impacts at 1,000 yards with either optic on a Mark 12? And I tell you what, spoiler alert, I can. This Mark 12 is an absolute shooter. But yeah, so that's why I chose it. I wanted the $3,000 price point of the Thermnight and roughly similar capabilities on the daytime side, so that's where we landed. The rest of the gear we're going to run in this video, the rifle is going to be new to the channel. This is going to be my Mark 12 Mod 1 clone or vibe rifle. So the lower is going to be from Griffin Armament, longtime supporter of my channel. They've got all kinds of cool AR and shooting related accessories, suppressors, components. Pretty much if you want it for shooting, Griffin Armament can probably hook you up. So shout out to Griffin for their support. But why I like this Mark II lower in particular, the right hand ambi bolt release is beautiful. Swipe it down to close the bolt. You can push it up to lock the bolt open. But this lower in particular has their new 2-stage trigger in it. So this 2-stage trigger comes in at $100. And I tell you what, my initial impressions are very good. So for $100, you're getting very clean brake, zero over travel, no creep. You're getting a capable trigger to shoot long range. So really impressed with that Griffin 2-stage trigger. They just released it. So I was excited to get out, see how it shot out to distance. And I tell you what, it shoots very well. The upper, aside from the internals, will be Centurion arms. So Centurion, this is their Mark 12 Mod 1 with the KAC RAS rail. So it has a very much Mark 12 Mod 1 vibe. Internals on it though, again, we'll go back to Griffin Armament because this is their new, I believe they call it the Enhanced Gas Pocket Bulk Carrier Group. You'll notice here there are no vent holes in the carrier. Reason being, it vents to the left-hand side. I'm sure we've all shot our ARs with suppressors, took our ears off, and experienced port pop. That's where your right ear gets a little bit of discomfort there after a round or two. So this Enhanced Gas Pocket Bulk Carrier Group is designed to vent into the receiver instead of out. It also has longer lock time to push more of the gas down the barrel versus out the ejection port, all with the goal of reducing port pop and making it more comfortable on your ear. By the end of this video, you're gonna have a look at my experience when I take my ears off and shoot this setup suppressed. For a suppressor, what are we running? We're running the Allen Engineering AEM5. Allen Engineering sent this out to me for use on the channel. Really appreciate their support in letting me put together and finish this Mark 12 Mod 1. It is such a clone vibe rifle, just a beautiful rifle, beautiful shooter. Wouldn't be possible, man, if you're putting together a Mark 12 or many other 5.56 kind of GWAT era rifles, you're gonna need an Allen Engineering clone or Allen Engineering suppressor. And in this case, the AEM5 goes perfectly on the Mark 12 Mod 1. And then finally, for a bipod solution, we're gonna be running the MDT single pole SkyPod. You can see this unit is equipped with the PR Shooting Solution pod knob. So I wanna shout these out. These are very affordable. They're like 25 bucks. They're 3D printed, but they give you a much more positive release and activation there of your legs. So those are from PR Shooting Solutions. When you use my code, there's something like 5% off of $25, so very affordable. The last piece that we have to mention right here is gonna be the ammo that we're shooting. This stuff really is the star of the show. So this is gonna be the Phantom Defense 77 grain OTM load. But this thing is going to be nuts because it's in the NAS3 case. This is a hybrid case capable of higher pressures. Higher pressures mean more velocity. More velocity means flatter shooting or longer capabilities. So I cannot wait to see or show you what these 77 grain OTM loads are gonna do from Phantom Defense. Again, I appreciate each of you taking the time to watch this video. And if you're interested in learning more about any of the gear that you see here, do it through that campsite bio. Now with that, let's get into the shooting portion of the video. While I'm shooting, you gotta let me know in the comments down below, what are you expecting for performance of these two different optical solutions? Do you think the digital 635R Thermnight is going to match the capabilities of a traditional daytime optic with weapon-mounted laser rangefinder? Let me know in the comments, and definitely let me know as we work through this video what you see for performance. So let's get into it. 100 yards, here we go. Before we can go out and shoot any distance with either optic, we need to start here at the 100-yard line and get a baseline of performance for our rifle, our ammo, true up our ballistic calculators, and make sure our zero is good. So let's chat about what I did at the 100-yard line to get ready to shoot distance. Now down at the bottom, you'll see this paper. This is what I used for zeroing and just initial group check. So none of that's on film. What I fired up here on film were these two groups. So I started with the Element Nexus, and I fired 5 rounds right here on this orange dot. Now, understand 5-round groups are statistically insignificant, but I only have so much of that Phantom Defense load, and I'd rather shoot it at distance than on paper, so we'll use 5-round groups. So this 5-round group right here landed, very nice, zero. I didn't make any change, but it measures 1.4 inches, or roughly 1.4 MOA, which is plenty good for a DMR type rifle to shoot practical targets out at distance, and you'll see that later on in the video. So accuracy wise, we'll call it 1.4 inches. I ran those 5 rounds across the FX True Ballistic chronograph and got an average speed of 2,800 feet per second, and I calculated G7BC of 0.198. From here, I loaded that information into the AB Boss app to pair with the Fire 4000 rangefinder that I used to laze my targets, get a distance, as well as a shooting solution. So I plugged in that 2,800 and the G7BC of 0.198. Then I shot the Element Nexus all the way out to 1,000 yards before swapping over to the Thermnight. Now it's worth mentioning, when I was running the Element Nexus, I found that G7BC was a little bit high compared to reality. So when I got out there to 800 and the 1,000-yard line, I saw my impacts landing different than what the calculator was calling for in that Fire 4000. So to fix that, I had to move my G7BC down to 0.183. So I believe my true G7BC on this bullet is 0.183 verified out to 1,000 yards. After firing that Element Nexus, I swapped over to the DNT Thermnight and fired these 5 rounds right here. Now one of the biggest questions I had, how would that digital scope, Thermnight, allow me to shoot groups at the 100-yard line. Would I sacrifice accuracy because of the digital screen? And I tell you what, I think the answer to that is no. The accuracy remained exactly the same. These 5 rounds measure 1.4 inches, so the exact same level of accuracy. That's probably what that rifle is capable of, considering it shot 2 5-round groups. 1.4 inches, just under 1.5 MOA, and as you'll see in the video, that's going to perform very well out to distance. These 5 rounds also measured right at 2,800 feet per second, so that is absolutely ripping for a 77 grain bullet, and that is thanks to the NAS 3 case of that Phantom Defense ammo, so you can get that higher pressure load, really crank up those velocities to push that 5.56 out to distances that most folks would normally say are not possible. So typically, in my experience, Mark 262 or a 5.56 77 grain load is running about 2,700 feet per second out of this barrel versus 2,800 for that Phantom Defense. The True Ballistic Chronograph also measured a G7BC on those 5 rounds of 0.198, but given I knew the corrected G7BC was 0.183 from the work I did with the Element Nexus, when I went into the DNT app, I loaded the G7BC of 0.183, the average speed of 2,800 feet per second, and I had the weather in the DNT app mirror what I was using in the Fire 4000. So my pressure was something like 25.9 or 25.7, I believe. Temperature was in the 45 to 50 degree range. That way, the data should be identical coming out of the 2 calculators, so that as I stretch out to distance, the data that I knew was true out of the Element Nexus should also be true coming out of the Thermnight. It's worth mentioning that Thermnight has a much higher scope over bore height. So on the Thermnight, you measure from the bore up to the day optic, and that's something like 4.25 or 4.3 inches. So very tall compared to 2.7 here with the Element Nexus. With that, the next part of the video, we're going to stretch out at distance. What I'm going to do is roll the footage running the Element Nexus and then cut over to the Thermnight to give you that kind of side-by-side comparison at each distance of how each optic did. Now let me know your thoughts. Do you think I'll be able to push the Thermnight out as far as I'm able to push the Element Nexus? I can't wait to hear it. I tell you what, we have a really cool video in store, so let's get into the longer range footage. Let's put our first rounds for the Element Nexus day optic. So as you can see, I've moved back several hundred yards, and I put up a 2/3 dipstick on the right and a 10-inch circle on the left. Now my data at 100 yards had a velocity of 2,800 feet per second and a G7BC of 0.198, which I have plugged into the AB Boss app and updated the Fire 4000 rangefinder. I also put in an 8-mile-an-hour wind from the 3 o'clock, so it's going to pull that into the data. So with that, let's find our target here, and we'll range it. I'll aim at the base. 398 yards. It's calling for 1.8 up. And right 0.6. Kind of a stout wind. Let's try the 2/3 dipstick. Pat. Pat. Look at that. Smoke off the plate. Pat. Try the 10-inch plate. High and right. Pat. Impact. So there we are, about 0.6 mils right, 1.8 up, connecting at 400 yards. Now let's give it a go with the DNT Thermnight. We're back here in the 400 yard range. So there you can see my targets. Let's go ahead and get our rangefinder going. There's the reticle. You can see the red square on the plate. Ooh. 404 yards, it's calling for 1.6 mils. You can see the hold there. Let's favor right, just off the edge. Pat. Pat. Pat, let's try the 10-inch. Pat. Pat. Impact. So just like that, you can see the DNT, no problem, 400 yards. Let's keep pushing further. We've moved back to one of my favorite shooting positions here off the rocks. We'll go ahead and range our targets. Again, I'll point at the base of the targets. 660 yards, it's calling for 4.6 up and right 1.5. I did update the wind to 10 miles an hour. So let's just see what we land at here. So we'll hold that. 4.6 up, right 1.5, 2/3 dipstick. Okay, so a little bit aggressive on the wind. Pack. Pack. Let's try the 2/3 or the circle. Okay, so just off that right edge. Just under it. Pack. The right edge. Impact. So as you can see, I misjudged my wind by a bit, but we did connect. Really no problem on the 2/3 dipstick or the 10-inch circle. I was able to spot my misses correct. Here we are back on the rocks with a DNT Thermnight. Let's run the same exercise. Get our rangefinder going here. You can see the aiming reticle there on the plate. 661 yards. It's calling for 4.5 MRAD. You can see my aiming point down there at the bottom. We'll zoom in just a bit. I tell you what, let's take the ears off and see how this AEM5 sounds with that Griffin enhanced bolt carrier group. That ought to reduce the port pop, so I'm curious to see what it sounds like. So here we go. We'll start on the 2/3 dipstick. I'm going to hold right roughly, probably call that like a 0.8. Impact first round. Impact. You can see the trace. That's crazy. Off the right edge. Off the right edge. Elevation looks good. Definitely off the right edge. Back. Let's try the 10-inch circle. Drop low and right. Back. I believe that was an impact. I think I heard it. Pretty cool, guys. That is 665 yards with a digital day scope. Laser rangefinder seems to be working, and I tell you what, the port pop in my right ear is not bad at all. That is really cool. We have this rock right here, and there's no discomfort. So that AEM5 sounds good. That enhanced bolt carrier from Griffin must be working, because normally when you fire an AR, you definitely get that port pop in your right ear. So let's keep pushing further. Some rounds on that 2/3 dipstick. So I'm zeroed out on the turret. Let's point at the base of the target. Let's get a good range. We're calling for 7.5 mil. That's 825 yards. So I'll dial on 7.5 just to make sure you guys can see it in the camera. And we're calling for 2 mils of right windage. And let's go ahead and we'll hold that, because it does feel pretty stout back here. So here we go on the 2/3 dipstick. Just off the right edge. Pack. The right edge. Pack. Let's come up a 10th. Pack. Like a 1.6. Pack. Impact. There's a handful of impacts. We're at 7.6 mils and 2 mils of right windage, but we're connecting pretty regular. Here we go with the DNT Thermnight. Again, we're in the ballpark of 800 something yards. Now, full transparency, I just had to run down and set up my full-size dipstick, because the rangefinder, as you can see, there's a good range at 825. but the rangefinder's having a little bit of trouble. I'm going to lock that in at 7.1 mils. When I had just a 10-inch plate and the 2/3 dipstick, I was getting really sporadic returns and nothing that I was confident in. It seems to be doing a little bit better out there on that full-size dipstick, so it seems like we might be reaching kind of the limits of the rangefinder here on the Thermnight, but we do have our reticle movement, which is what we wanted. Now it's worth noting, I swapped this over to the dial-in mode instead of the holdover mode, which means instead of placing the holdover down somewhere on the reticle and zooming me out, now it shifts the whole reticle and I can stay zoomed in. And I will have the horizontal crosshairs to make my wind holds with. Let's try that 2/3 dipstick. As you can see, no ears. I want to see how it sounds out here in a wide open space. A little bit on the focus, and let's start right 1 mil. I'm going to zoom in a bit. 1 mil. First round impact at 820 yards. Second round impact. Low left. The left edge. All right, so that dropped to low left. Let's cheat up into that upper right corner. Pack. The left edge. Pack. Pack. Impact. Well, there you have it. 820 yards. As you can see, my drop was just a little bit more than the Thermnight called for. That could be because I think my range was just a bit short. Let me get on it with the Fire 4000. So the Fire 4000 should be relatively zeroed up to this reticle. And it's calling for 830 yards, so we're definitely in the ballpark. Man, that is cool. 2/3 dipstick just hammering it with a digital optic. Let's try 1,000. How about we really stretch the legs on this Mark 12 with that Phantom Defense 77 grain load. I put up a full-size dipstick out there, which will range. Should be right in the ballpark of 1,000 yards. 1,007 is calling for 11.6 mils, which I've dialed on. Calling for 2.8 mils of right windage, which we will hold. Now you gotta let me know in the comments who's banking on a first round impact. Actually, let's check our magnification. Let's make sure we're in the ballpark of 20 power, so no real advantage here versus the digital scope. Here we go. 2.8 mils right, full size dipstick. Okay, a little aggressive on the wind call. Let's come back to like 2 mils. Okay, still aggressive, 1.5. Impact. Over the head. Let's come down 2/10. Impact. Off that left edge. Impact. The right edge. Impact. Impact. There you have it. A Mark 12 18-inch 5.56 shooting that Phantom Defense at 1,000 yards. That is really cool. Now let's give it a go with the digital scope. With the Thermnight, see if we can connect as well as we did with the day optic. So there's the rangefinder. And it's not picking up that plate. Picking up anything out there. 1269, that Doesn't sound right. Let's check the Fire 4000. 500 is definitely not right up there. 1021. Not picking up anything out there. Let me run, put it up on the four-wheeler quick and see if that'll give it maybe a better angle. Okay, so as you see, off the four-wheeler it did pick up 1019 off of something. I'm not confident it was a plate, but I know that's in the ballpark of where I need to be, so I went ahead and captured that distance. Let's zoom in. Let's give her all 20 power, check our focus. Looks decent. Let's give it a go. Let's just do the same, like, let's go 1.5 mils. First round impact, dude, that is just nuts. Off that left edge. That. Went over it. That. That. Guys, that is nuts. 1,020 yards, full-size IPSC, 5.56 Mark 12. I mean, we just went, what, 70% hit ratio out there? That Phantom Defense ammo is nuts. So, as you notice, the laser rangefinder seemed to run out of steam out there, but I did get some read back in the ballpark where I knew it should be. And as you can see, the data pretty well spot on coming out of this thing. So with that, let's wrap up and I'll give you a summary of my thoughts running the Thermnight side by side with the Element Nexus. Well, there you have it, a side-by-side comparison of the DNT Thermnight 635R digital optic during the day out to 1,000 yards versus a traditional style scope with weapon-mounted laser rangefinder. Now, what did you think about the performance? You gotta let me know in the comments down below. I tell you what, I am blown away. That DNT Thermnight actually performed way better than I expected. Coming into this video, I was nervous about that digital display allowing me to actually see the target clearly downrange, clearly see my impacts, and then make corrections. And I tell you what, in my experience, in my conditions out here, now keep in mind, these conditions are almost ideal. There's no trash on the ground. It's fairly dry, so you can see dust. These are great conditions for what we're trying to do out here with a 5.56. But I tell you what, that Thermnight, very impressive. So what I saw out here was great performance out of both optics. Certainly the daytime optic I felt a little bit more comfortable with. That Fire 4000 weapon-mounted laser rangefinder, I'm still getting used to, still learning to use and get it fine-tuned. But the daytime optic, at 100 yards, we saw it shoot a 1.4 inch, 5-round group, so very acceptable accuracy for a Mark 12 rifle like this. Then we started to push out to distance. We shot at 400 yards, here at 660, 830, and 1,000 or just over 1,000 yards. And I tell you what I saw at each of those distances was the ability to clearly see the target, clearly see my impacts, make my corrections, to get a decent number of hits on target. That's exactly what I would expect out of a premium day optic like this with a nice rangefinder. You saw me with the rangefinder have to transition between the scope and the rangefinder to go over and look at my data, come back into the scope to make that shot. And at 1,000 yards with the Nexus and the Fire 4000, I had to adjust my BC just a little bit. So some of those rounds were landing a little bit high there at the 1,000-yard line. Remember, I had to come down 2/10. I cleaned that up in my BC before I go over to the Thermnight. When I got over to the Thermnight, though, at 100 yards, we shot the same group. So we shot a 1.4 inch group with the Thermnight. So really, accuracy-wise, in my opinion, it's very capable of the same as the day optic in these conditions. Zeroing process is super simple. All you do is freeze the image, move the crosshair over. There's a ton of video about that online. It takes no time to get zeroed. It's very simple. So accuracy-wise, I was impressed. Zeroing process, I was impressed. Seems to hold zero throughout the day, which is a must. Then we moved out to start shooting distance. What we saw there at the 400-yard line was laser rangefinder was spot on. The ballistic drop information was spot on. At that point, I was using the holdover portion of the reticle where it gave you an aiming point down below, you hold over. That worked perfectly. Plug the information into the app, man, it was dialed. I think we had a first round hit maybe, I don't remember, at 400 yards. Move back here to 660 yards, 2/3 IPSC, no problem. We did have a first round impact here, I remember. Again, still using that holdover mode. So the laser rangefinder worked perfectly. That display up to 20 power worked perfectly. I could see my misses, moved over and engaged the 10-inch plate, 660 yards. Really had no problems. So very impressive performance here. Move back to the 830-yard line, and that's where I started to notice a little bit on the laser rangefinder. It didn't have the juice of the Fire 4000. So what I realized there at 830 yards, the laser rangefinder was a little bit finicky. I had to make sure to hit the plate to be able to get a distance, put the full-size IPSC up, etc. So aside from the rangefinder though, once I got the range, again, ballistic drop was spot on. So the calculator is working perfectly with the G7BC that I had trued previously. I knew it was going to work, or I knew the G7BC was correct. Plug it into the DNT app. I was curious, did their app spit out correct information using data that I knew was good? And it did, out to 830 yards. Remember, at 830 yards, I transitioned over to the dial-in mode, so it moved the whole reticle versus giving me an aiming point. I like that because it allowed me to move left and right and see my windage holds a little bit better. Then we move out to 1,020 yards, and at that point, I felt like the rangefinder was definitely beyond its capability. So I feel like the laser rangefinder claimed to be 1,000 yard, and it probably is on a reflective target. In the conditions that I shoot in, it seemed like 800 was kind of pushing it, and 1,000 was probably beyond. I was able to move up onto the four-wheeler. I did get a range at 1,020, which allowed my reticle to move down so that I could actually shoot it. And I tell you what, at 1,020 with this Mark 12, we hammered. I think we had 6 to 7 impacts with a digital day optic, 20 power zoom. I could see it clearly. I could see the flasher, man. It was really impressive, actually. It definitely performed well above what I expected at that distance. I was nervous that when you got up to 20 power on the zoom, it would become very pixelated and hard to shoot, but that wasn't the case at all. So I tell you what, I'm really impressed. Number one, with the performance of this Mark 12 rifle and this Phantom Defense ammo out to 1,000 yards. Beautiful performance, 2,800 feet per second out of this stuff, very flat shooting. And as you saw, consistent on a torso at 1,000 yards with a Mark 12 is pretty nuts. You gotta let me know what you thought about that in the comments. So when it comes down to it, remember we opened the video with the idea of the Thermnight was about $3,000 versus the day optic at about $3,800. Does it actually perform to that price level? And based on what I saw today, I would say yes. Now, I wasn't out here shooting tiny targets. I was shooting targets that are very normal for me. And for the type of shooting that I do and enjoy doing, very capable, and I feel like a solid product for that $3,000 price point. Now, I know many of you are probably wondering about the 225R, the roughly $1,000 version, and we'll have a comparison video coming up where I run it side by side with the 635, so stay tuned for that. But out here today, when you look at roughly similar price points, the capability was there in the Thermnight, and I believe it performed as expected and actually beyond my expectations. So really impressed with what I saw here. So with that, let me know in the comments down below what you thought. Let me know what you want to see me do with these Thermnights while I've got them. Finally, if you've made it this far, I've got to ask you to help me grow this channel. It's super simple. Like this video, comment down below, let me know what you thought, and then most impactful is subscribe. I'm on a mission to get to 100,000 subscribers, and I need your help to do it. If you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, go ahead and click that subscribe button to get in line for my next video drop. And if you are subscribed, thank you for your continued support. So with that, we'll wrap up, and I hope to see you in my next video.